Good morning, distinguished guests, respected colleagues, and fellow scholars. It is truly an honor to stand before you today. We gather here at a moment of profound transformation, a moment where artificial intelligence is reshaping economies, industries, and even human behavior. But today, I want to explore something deeper. Not just how AI changes ASEAN, but how ASEAN can shape the future of AI itself. Because the real question is not technological, it is civilizational. Today, ASEAN stands at a strategic crossroads. On one side, we have artificial intelligence driving efficiency, scalability, and competitiveness. It enables faster decisions, wider reach, and rapid growth. On the other side, we have local wisdom, our traditions, our values, and our ways of sustaining life and community. These are not just cultural elements, but systems that build trust and maintain balance. At first glance, these two forces seem to move in different directions. One emphasizes speed and scale, the other emphasizes context and sustainability. And this is the challenge we face. Can we move forward without losing who we are? Because this is not a choice between technology and tradition. It is a question of how we integrate both. So let me put the core question as directly as possible. Can ASEAN become more technologically advanced without becoming more culturally disconnected? This is not just about software or computing power. It goes much deeper than that. It is about the choices we make in development. It is about how we allocate capital, how we prioritize investments, and how we design systems that people actually trust and use. Because technology does not operate in isolation. It interacts with institutions, with social norms, and with everyday behavior. And when these elements are misaligned, even the most advanced systems can fail to deliver meaningful outcomes. So the question is not whether ASEAN can adopt AI. The region is already doing that. The real question is whether that adoption will be inclusive, sustainable, and grounded in local realities. If we answer this question well, the region gains more than growth. It gains a model of intelligent development that combines efficiency with legitimacy and innovation with social trust. And that is what makes this question so important. Why does this matter now? Because three major realities are converging, and they are moving faster than our institutions can adapt. First, ASEAN's digital economy has crossed the $300 billion threshold. This is not just a milestone of adoption. It signals a structural shift where digital systems are becoming the backbone of economic activity, from commerce to services to governance. Second, fintech has evolved from niche disruption into systemic infrastructure. It is no longer peripheral. It is shaping how capital is allocated, how risks are assessed, and who gets included in the financial system. In many ways, it is becoming the operating layer of the regional economy. Third, the sustainability challenge is no longer abstract or rhetorical. It is measurable, immediate, and deeply connected to both energy systems and financial decisions. The transition toward cleaner energy is underway, but it is uneven and it requires large-scale coordination between technology, policy, and capital. When we bring these three trends together, a clear pattern emerges. The region is digital enough to accelerate, it is financially active enough to scale, and it is environmentally exposed enough to demand a different development model. But this also creates pressure, because these systems are advancing faster than the institutions designed to govern them. And this is precisely why ASEAN cannot afford a purely technocratic AI agenda. Because the challenge is no longer just about building better systems, it is about aligning technology, finance, and sustainability in a way that is coherent, inclusive, and actually workable in real-world conditions. The signal from ASEAN is now unmistakable. AI investment is rising rapidly across the region. In the past 12 months alone, More than $2.3 billion has been invested in over 680 AI startups. This shows that AI is no longer just a narrative. It is becoming an investable sectoral reality. At the same time, early-stage fintech remains highly active. More than 60% of ASEAN fintech funding in 2024 is still going into early-stage ventures. This tells us that confidence in future market creation is still strong, and that capital is actively shaping what comes next. And alongside this, the clean energy transition is accelerating. But it is not incremental. Current projections suggest that renewable capacity may need to increase by 3 to 5 times by 2035. This requires not only technology, but large-scale coordination of finance and infrastructure. When we connect these signals, a deeper transformation becomes visible. The region is no longer just digitizing, it is reorganizing how intelligence, capital, and infrastructure interact. And this shifts the core question we need to ask. Because the question is no longer whether AI will enter the system. It already has. The real question is what kind of AI-enabled economy ASEAN chooses to finance and govern. Will it prioritize only efficiency and scale, or will it also embed sustainability, inclusion, and long-term resilience? Because the answer to that question will shape not only growth, but the direction of development itself. From South Korea, the most useful lesson is not cultural transfer. It is strategic coherence. What we see in Korea is a clear alignment between infrastructure, capital, and national ambition around AI. This is not happening at the margins, but at scale. For example, there is a pledged private investment of around 65 trillion won between 2024 and 2027. This reflects not just interest, but a coordinated commitment to building AI capability at the national level. At the same time, the targets for adoption are equally ambitious. By 2030, Korea aims for around 70% AI adoption in industry and up to 95% in the public sector. This signals that AI is not treated as isolated innovation, but as economy-wide infrastructure. And this is supported by deep digital foundations. Fiber already accounts for about 90.5% of fixed broadband, and 5G reaches around 55% of mobile broadband. This level of infrastructure depth makes large-scale diffusion possible. When we bring these elements together, a pattern becomes clear. Korea is not just investing in AI. It is aligning systems to support it, from connectivity to capital to policy direction. And that coherence matters because it shows what deliberate coordination between state and market can achieve when it is sustained and consistent. For ASEAN, the lesson is not to replicate Korea. The contexts are fundamentally different. The challenge is to build its own version of coherence, one that aligns technology, finance, and governance, but remains grounded in its own social and cultural realities. Korea and ASEAN are not symmetric cases, and that is exactly why the comparison matters. They are starting from very different conditions, and those differences shape how each approaches AI, development, and governance. If we look at the starting point, Korea has high infrastructure depth and strong policy coordination. This allows it to move quickly and implement strategies at scale. In contrast, ASEAN is far more diverse, readiness is uneven across countries, and local heterogeneity is much stronger. This creates complexity, but also flexibility. The governance logic is also different. Korea operates through more formal, institutional, and centralized systems. Decisions can be coordinated and executed with clarity. ASEAN, on the other hand, operates through a hybrid model. Formal systems exist, but they are intertwined with local, relational, and community-based structures. Legitimacy is not only institutional, but also social. This difference becomes even clearer in the financing task. Korea focuses on scaling national AI capability quickly. The priority is speed and diffusion at scale. ASEAN faces a different challenge. It must expand inclusion while also funding the green transition. So the question is not just scale, but who is included and how transitions are managed across very different contexts. Because of this, the strategic risks also differ. In Korea, the risk is moving too fast without enough openness or ecosystem diversity. In ASEAN, the risk is adoption without sufficient context or legitimacy, where systems may exist but are not fully trusted or used. So the main lesson is not the same. Korea shows us how to scale. ASEAN shows us how to sustain. And the real strategic opportunity lies in selective learning, combining institutional efficiency with social intelligence, rather than trying to imitate one model directly. Local wisdom should not be treated as decoration. It is an operating logic. It shapes how communities manage shared resources, how they interpret risk, and how they decide whether a system is trustworthy enough to adopt. In many parts of ASEAN, decisions are not made purely based on technical efficiency. They are shaped by relationships, by norms, and by collective experience. This means that even the most advanced system can fail if it does not align with how people actually think, decide, and interact. At the same time, when systems are aligned with local logic, adoption becomes smoother, trust becomes stronger, and outcomes become more sustainable. So local wisdom is not about looking backward. It is not nostalgia. It is a form of embedded intelligence that has evolved over time to maintain balance, resilience, and social cohesion. And once we understand this, the role of culture becomes much clearer. It is no longer a soft variable. It is not something we consider at the end of the process. It becomes a design variable, something that needs to be integrated from the very beginning when we build systems, design policies, and allocate resources. And this shift in perspective is essential if we want innovation to be not only effective, but also sustainable in the long run. This is where behavioral finance becomes central. Because financial inclusion is not only about access, it is about behavior. We often assume that once people have access to digital platforms or financial services, adoption will naturally follow. But in reality, decisions are shaped by trust, by social norms, and by perceived legitimacy. This is why trust networks matter. Formal systems may approve a transaction, but communities still decide whether that transaction feels acceptable and legitimate. Trust is not only institutional, it is relational. Second, inclusion itself is behavioral. Access to apps or credit does not automatically lead to responsible or sustainable use. People interpret financial tools through their own experiences, beliefs, and social context. And third, adoption always involves friction. The more a system ignores local norms and expectations, the more resistance it encounters. That resistance may not always be visible, but it shows up in low usage, misuse, or eventual rejection. And importantly, this friction is not just a social issue, it becomes an economic cost. Systems become more expensive to implement, harder to scale, and less stable over time, even if they appear technically efficient on the surface. So, the key insight here is simple. Financial systems do not operate in a culturally empty space. They are shaped by behavior. And if we want them to work effectively, we need to design with that behavior in mind. My proposed model is simple, but it is structured as a triangle. At one corner, we have AI. AI provides analytical capability. It helps us process data, predict outcomes, and optimize decisions at scale. It is the engine of intelligence in the system. At another corner, we have finance. Finance allocates capital, prices risk, and shapes incentives. It determines which ideas get funded, which sectors grow, and how transitions are actually implemented. And at the third corner, we have culture. Culture provides legitimacy, trust, and the logic of adoption. It determines whether people accept, adapt, or resist a system in practice. These three elements are not independent. They are deeply interconnected. If any one of them is missing or misaligned, the system becomes unstable. If AI is strong but finance is weak, innovation cannot scale. If finance is strong but culture is ignored, adoption becomes fragile and contested. And if culture is strong but AI capability is limited, the system may be stable, but it cannot evolve effectively. So the real challenge is not to optimize each component separately. It is to align them. Because when AI, finance, and culture are aligned, something different happens. AI becomes not only efficient, but also investable. It becomes socially grounded because it reflects local realities. And it becomes durable because it is supported by trust and legitimacy. And this is what makes the model powerful. It creates the conditions for a form of development that is not only technologically advanced, but also capable of supporting long-term green transformation. The hybrid model becomes practical when we think in layers. Because in reality, these elements do not operate all at once. They operate in sequence, and each layer plays a distinct role. The first layer is AI. AI predicts and optimizes. It helps us identify demand patterns, assess price risks, and detect resource bottlenecks. It generates the intelligence that informs decisions. But intelligence alone is not enough. This brings us to the second layer, which is finance. Finance translates those insights into action. It turns predictions into loans, investments, and incentives. It is the mechanism that allows ideas to scale and move into real economic activity. However, even when systems are intelligent and well-funded, they do not automatically work in practice. This is where the third layer becomes critical, which is culture. Culture determines whether the system is trusted, whether people are willing to adopt it, and whether it can be sustained over time. It anchors the system in real-world behavior and local legitimacy. So when we look at these layers together, we see a clear sequence. Technology improves efficiency, finance enables scale, and culture secures traction. If any of these layers breaks down, the system struggles. You can have accurate predictions, but no capital to act on them. You can have strong investment, but low adoption due to lack of trust. Or you can have local acceptance, but limited capability to evolve and improve. But when all three layers function together, the outcome is very different. We begin to see a system that is not only intelligent, but also financeable and socially durable. And that is what makes the hybrid model not just conceptual, but operational. If we take this keynote seriously, then the next step is practical. This is no longer about diagnosis, it is about what different actors should actually do next. Let me start with governments. Governments need to move beyond generic AI regulation. They need culturally intelligent governance. That means designing policies that recognize local diversity, social norms, and different levels of readiness across communities. At the same time, public finance has a critical role. It should not only fund projects, but help de-risk green experimentation. Because without risk sharing, many sustainable innovations will simply not scale. Now, turning to financial institutions. Finance needs to evolve from standardized ESG templates to context-aware metrics. Because what counts as sustainable or responsible is not always the same across regions and communities. More importantly, financial products must be designed around real behavior. Not ideal users, not textbook assumptions, but how people actually make decisions in practice. Finally, universities. Universities have a uniquely strategic role. They are not just knowledge producers, but system integrators. They need to build interdisciplinary talent, people who understand AI, finance, policy, and culture at the same time. And beyond that, universities must act as translators between data systems, capital systems, and community realities. This means turning local knowledge into usable datasets, frameworks, and models. And it means prototyping solutions with communities, not just for them. So across these three domains, the message is consistent. We cannot copy and paste solutions, because what works in one system will not automatically work in another. Real progress comes from adaptation, integration, and co-design. Universities are critical in this transition, because they can do something that markets and governments often struggle to do on their own. They can translate across systems. They can connect AI with finance. They can connect policy with real community conditions. And they can translate local wisdom into structured, usable knowledge. This is a very different role from traditional academia. It is not only about publishing, it is about building translation capacity. First, universities need to teach across silos. AI, finance, sustainability, and culture can no longer be treated as separate disciplines, because in reality, they interact all the time. Second, universities need to build local data sets. Local wisdom cannot scale if it remains informal. It needs to be documented, structured, and translated responsibly. And third, universities need to prototype with communities, not designing solutions in isolation, but co-designing with the people who will actually use them. Because the most credible innovation is not just theoretically sound. It is tested in real conditions and accepted by real communities. So in this transition, universities should not stand at the edge and observe. They should stand in the middle, helping to connect, translate, and design the system itself. So let me close this part with a very simple proposition. Do not copy, hybridize. This may sound straightforward, but it is actually a strategic choice. ASEAN can and should learn from Korea, especially its discipline of scale, its infrastructure depth, and its policy coordination. But learning does not mean replicating, because ASEAN operates in a very different social and cultural environment. It is more diverse, more decentralized, and more dependent on local legitimacy. If ASEAN tries to copy directly, it risks building systems that are technically efficient but socially fragile. So the objective is not to become a smaller version of Korea. The objective is to become a stronger version of ASEAN itself. That means combining technological capability with cultural intelligence, combining scale with legitimacy, and combining efficiency with resilience. That is what hybridization really means. Let me close with one final thought. If ASEAN can combine intelligent systems, sustainable finance, and local wisdom, it will not simply adopt the future, it will help shape it. Because what we are really discussing here is not just technology adoption, it is model creation. A model of development that is not only efficient, but also inclusive, legitimate, and sustainable. And this is where ASEAN has a unique advantage. Unlike more centralized systems, ASEAN is inherently diverse. It is built on pluralism, community structures, and layered governance. That complexity is often seen as a constraint, but in this context, it can become a strength. Because the future of AI will not be defined only by speed or scale. It will be defined by how well systems align with human realities. So the opportunity for ASEAN is not to compete on being the fastest. It is to lead in being the most human-centered. An AI ecosystem that is intelligent because it improves precision, allocation, and decision-making. Financeable because capital can flow into transitions that are credible and scalable. And durable because legitimacy reduces friction, resistance, and systemic fragility. When these three come together, we move beyond short-term innovation toward long-term transformation. So the real question is no longer whether ASEAN can catch up. The real question is whether ASEAN can lead by offering a different model of how technology, finance, and society work together. And if it does, ASEAN will not just participate in the global AI future, it will help redefine it. Thank you very much. I hope this keynote has shown one central idea. The strongest future for ASEAN is not a choice between technology and tradition. It is not about rejecting AI, and it is not about preserving culture in isolation. It is about integration. A future that is analytically intelligent, where AI improves how we make decisions, financially scalable, where capital supports real, sustainable transitions, and culturally grounded, where systems are trusted, adopted, and meaningful to the communities they serve. That is the kind of future that does not only grow, but endures. Thank you.